The following podcast may contain adult language and conversations revolving around situations not suitable for immature audiences. Spoilers and general political incorrectness can often be expected, so listener discretion is advised.
They must be destroyed on sight!
Alright, and welcome to a They Must Be Destroyed on Sight bonus episode, intermission episode, as Lee calls them. Lee and I, despite our best efforts, could not manage to get together and actually record this week. We were supposed to do a Predator 2, RoboCop 2 combo episode. Hopefully you'll get that next week, but until then, I did kind of volunteer to kind of throw a little something up today. Basically, I've watched 3 classic westerns this week, and I'm going to talk to you guys about them. The 3 westerns we're going to talk about today are The Hanging Tree from 1959, My Darling Clementine from 1946, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance from 1962. We're going to do them in that order, despite the fact that that's not chronological, and the reasons for that will become clear soon. I'm recording this on the day that at least 50 people were killed in the nightclub Pulse in Orlando. And my Twitter and Facebook feed's been covered up with people arguing about that. There's been a lot of right-wing assholes talking about, all Muslims deserve to die and that kind of shit. And I think that's reprehensible. And that's definitely going to play a little bit into some of the stuff that I have to say kind of going down the rest of this little intermission. Mostly because I think that the Western genre, and at least 2 of these films in particular, are kind of about the question of, kind of law and order, the rule of law versus the rule of men. I think that the genre kind of works very well to kind of talk about, what violence is good for, and the reasons that we build civilization and build cities and have laws and states and that sort of thing to begin with. And the events of last night and kind of waking up this morning and seeing this tragedy, the largest mass shooting in American history, definitely affected the way that I kind of will maybe approach talking about these films. So if you aren't interested in listening to me talk about that, feel free to delete this now, but that will definitely kind of color what you're about to hear. But before that, let's just move on and talk about the films a bit. Notably, the reason that I've been watching a lot of classic westerns is actually because and we've mentioned them on the show before, the Pex Lives podcast, nominally a Doctor Who podcast, have decided to do a bunch of classic westerns in terms, is kind of bonus content, kind of at the beginning of their episodes. And in particular, in the first of their episodes, they covered 3 westerns over the course of about 2 hours, and then spent 40 minutes on the actual Doctor Who story that they were actually supposed to be there to talk about. So, if you are a fan of westerns or a film discussion in general, I would highly recommend you go check out some of the Pex Lives episodes. I'm sure Lee will include a link in the show notes to that most recent one, but they're doing some really, really nice stuff. I have not listened to their most recent episode yet because they're doing 2 films that I'm going to be discussing today. So hopefully we'll get a little back and forth. And I know some of the at least James I know is expressed interest in coming on to this show at some time. So go give them some love. Anyway, the first film I'm going to talk about today is The Hanging Tree. This is a Gary Cooper Western. This is from 1959, and it's a deeply, deeply strange film. It's kind of a character study of the Gary Cooper character, who is a guy with the last name of Frail. It's a character study. It doesn't really have a clear, message about this guy. But somehow it also kind of feels really moralistic. And maybe that's just kind of the aesthetics of what a 1959 Western is going to do. Just kind of makes it feel like it's trying to send some kind of message. But anyway, so Gary Cooper plays Frail, who's a doctor in this kind of on the outskirts of this kind of tiny mining community out in the west somewhere, who rescues this guy named Rune, who's this young guy who's played by Ben Piazza, from a hanging. So Piazza was trying to steal gold off a guy's claim, and then forces him into this indefinite servitude. Basically, says if you're not going to basically be my slave, then I'm going to turn you in, and then you're gonna hang for it. So that's kind of a weird kind of thing to do. Frail is kind of portrayed as sort of a good guy to the rest of the community. He does provide cheap to free medical care to the people who can't afford to pay him. But there is a little sense like there is a scene towards the beginning where he kind of says, hey, you don't owe me anything to this kind of poor family for your daughter's medical treatment, but he does insist on getting a kiss from the little girl in a scene that, like, for the 50-something Gary Cooper at this point, it does feel a little bit creepy to me. It gets a little bit, like, pedophilic, but, that's maybe just me kind of reading something into it. The guy's actually kind of a monster because he's, like, using his resources and his authority and his kind of moral authority to manipulate the people around him. There's a comic relief character played by Carl Malden, who's named Frenchie. And at first, you kind of see him kind of wandering around and being goofy. Literally the first time you see him, he's got a boil on his ass that he needs the doctor to lance. But this guy kind of becomes increasingly unhinged and violent after a Swedish woman named Elizabeth, who's played by Maria Schell, gets rescued from injuries due to a Stagecoach accident, and she becomes close with Frail. She and Frail kind of become friends and possibly kind of romantic interests, but Elizabeth is also kind of into Rune. So there's this kind of complicated 3 to 4 person relationship kind of going on that doesn't really make a lot of sense because you don't really get a sense of the characters enough to really kind of follow, like, kind of the emotional through line. Basically, it ends, Elizabeth kind of goes off to start her own gold claim. Rune goes with her. At this point, he's realized that Frail isn't going to turn him in. He actually threw the unique bullet that was supposed to be the big evidence against Rune away towards the beginning of the film. And you kind of end up with, after they finally find some cash, you get a riot over the gold claim, and there are some really credible threats of rape from Frenchie towards Elizabeth, and the town just burns down to the ground. Frail's almost hung by the town because there's this kind of medicine man, this kind of pre-scientific medical person who is basically sees Frail as kind of cutting into his business model, but Elizabeth saves everybody by giving up her gold claim, and it kind of ends with this sense that Frail and Elizabeth are gonna start boning. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a really, really kind of odd film. If you're a fan of Gary Cooper, it's worth seeing, but this is kind of forgettable, and honestly, I had to go back and find a plot synopsis to really even dig that much out of it. It's, I don't know, I feel like I'm missing something with this film. It was based on a novel. I might one day kind of go and try to find the novel and see if the novel kind of makes more sense out of it, but, really strange film, and, so that one's enough. The next 2 I'm going to talk about, I'm going to kind of talk about together. These are 2 films by John Ford. My Darling Clementine from 1946, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance from 1962. And no, I had not seen either of these films before now. I'm not a real film nerd, so you shouldn't be listening to this at all. Ford is kind of broadly known for these, like, expansive landscapes and this kind of, like, deft camera work and excellent framing and cinematography and all that sort of thing. But I think both of these films really represents something else that he was really able to do, and that is he had a deep understanding of character, something that I think was lacking in some of the performances in The Hanging Tree, which was not directed by John Ford. And he's also got a real gift for directing comedy. There are some really interesting kind of comic sequences in both of these films. It's subtle, it's small, but there's some really funny stuff. So let's start with My Darling Clementine. This is from 1946. This was my favorite film of the 3. It is the first cinematic telling of the gunfight at the OK Corral myth, or event. It was a real event, but it is kind of risen into myth just over the retellings over the years. There was a novel in the 30s that this is based on. It takes a lot of liberties with real events. Apparently, the novel does, and then this is based on the novel. So this isn't like if you're looking for like the historical background of the gunfight of the OK Corral. This is not the place to start. But it is probably Ford's greatest film. Roger Ebert considered it so. And I have deep respect for Roger Ebert, so we'll just I'm not going to say it absolutely is because I haven't seen all of Ford's films, but it's pretty fucking good. Basically, you've got Wyatt Earp. He's played by Henry Fonda, and a great fucking performance, as Henry Fonda just always did. Anyway, he comes into the town of Tombstone, and he becomes marshal after finding out his brother was killed by cattle rustlers. Later on, he comes into contact with this gambler named Doc Holliday, who's played by Victor Mature, and the two strike up this kind of ambiguous and fractious friendship. This is after one of the funny sequences. You actually get a bit where first coming into town, Henry Fonda, as Earp, has to wants to get a shave, and you get this kind of a big old fancy barber's chair, the first of its kind in the area, and there's the kind of crazy racism thing going on where there's an Indian who's drunken and he's like shooting up the place. And there is some good comedy with Ford not Ford, Fonda kind of going like, oh my god, how can you get a shave around here with all these guns going off. Pretty funny stuff, pretty cool little sequence despite the kind of period racism. So he and Doc Holliday kind of get into a friendship. A little later on, Clementine, Kathy Downs, shows up one day. She's an ex-fiance of Holliday's, and then quickly begins to be attracted to Earp. The Doc's girlfriend, Chihuahua, who's played by Linda Darnell, who's basically my dead girlfriend at this point. Hopefully she would consent to that. I just adore her. She's a little bit miscast in this role, but she's magnetic and she kind of steals a lot of the scenes she's in, but she has very, very little to do. This was during a period when she was really fighting with the studio and I think really was just looking for work, but really didn't like being on this film very much. Anyway, Chihuahua ends up having a necklace that Earp recognizes as being formerly owned by his now deceased brother, and he knows she could only have gotten it by the person who killed the brother. She says she got it from the Doc, but then eventually she relents and reveals that she got it from one of the Clanton brothers being the cattle rustlers we kind of saw at the very beginning of the film, and that sets up the kind of emotional stakes for the gunfight that you get at the end. So most of the tellings of the kind of the gunfight of the OK Corral really kind of focus on this idea that the gunfight, we're just kind of treading water to get to the gunfight. This is a very different film than that. This is a film where the whole point is to kind of reveal this kind of very kind of complex, fractious nature of all the relationships in the film. You almost get this not even a love triangle, but a love quadrilateral between Chihuahua, Clementine, Doc Holliday, and Wyatt Earp. You kind of get this kind of sense of like different kinds of romantic relationships possibly being built and different kinds of friendships being built, and kind of the various characters respect each other to different degrees. But it's kind of about the way that society is kind of being built, and then there's this kind of external factor, these kind of outside actors, the rustlers who are kind of coming in and threatening our heroes with violence, and death, and actually do, and obviously they do kill the brother James before, kind of off screen early on in the film. This is probably a masterpiece, as I mentioned. This is a really, really phenomenal film. The version that I watched is kind of a shitty copy on YouTube. It's really probably worth spending the $3 to rent it, or find it through some other means. There is a Criterion disc that I'm actually interested in, but it's a little bit out of my price range right now. But I know you can view this legally on YouTube or Google Play, or probably Amazon for just a few bucks. So probably worth visiting via that method if you're so inclined to do so. It's got 4 really, really great performances in it, and it's gorgeous, even though it's black and white. It's got this kind of silvery sheen to the photography. It's got this really, really beautiful setup, and I really had a great time watching this. The characters are really, really well drawn, and it was a really great viewing experience. Highly recommended. The third film I'm going to talk about today, and this is one that I definitely have issues with. That is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. This is from 1962. And it actually has James Stewart, John Wayne, Vera Miles, Lee Marvin, Edmund O'Brien, Lee Van Cleef, and Woody Strode as Pompey, who, if this was a full episode of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, I might try to put together some of the gay subtext between he and John Wayne, who actually, I was kind of reading the background, they did not fucking get along at all on set because of various reasons, which I don't think had much to do with John Wayne's racism, but might have. Anyway, this is kind of the big selling point of this is that it's James Stewart and John Wayne together in there. I think this is the only film they ever did together. They're both in their 50s at this point, so they're both a little bit old to kind of be playing Western heroes. But this is a really fucking amazing film. For the first, it's about a 2-hour film, and for the first about hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, this is basically a masterpiece. It starts off, you kind of get this idea that James Stewart's kind of ridden into town on a stagecoach, and it's kind of in this sort of present day, or, around 1910 or so. Tom Donovan, who's played by John Wayne, has died. He's going to come in for the funeral. He's this kind of big, uppity, muckety-muck guy who's got he's a senator. He's well-respected, et cetera, et cetera. He spent years kind of working on irrigation projects and, I guess, electrification, all sorts of things to build the town up. After a few minutes, he starts to tell this story of, how he became the man who shot Liberty Valance. You kind of learn that the younger James Stewart was, just kind of a lawyer. He was coming from the East. He was coming to kind of settle in a town. He was bringing his law books. He has his case full of law books. And his stagecoach is robbed by Liberty Valance, who is played by Lee Marvin. And Lee Marvin is phenomenal in this fucking film. Liberty Valance is a brutal thug of a person. Liberty Valance literally carries a horsewhip and just whips his victims with it. It's brutal, it's awful, it's violent, it's shockingly violent for 1962. It's a phenomenal performance, possibly the greatest performance in the film. One of my favorite, probably my favorite villain I've seen in a film this year. I'd have to go back and look at all the other films I saw this year to make sure, but goddamn, that was a fucking amazing performance. Basically James Stewart, as Rance Stoddard, he gets, almost killed by Liberty Valance, left for dead. He's discovered in the desert by John Wayne's character, Tom Donovan. He's brought to this kind of restaurant where there are these basically women who are nurses and who kind of nurse him back to health, and he's allowed to stay in the back of the restaurant. He does dishes to kind of pay his rent, pay his way, and it really is kind of one of the interesting things about the film, at least for me. There are some interesting gender politics, which I'll get into here in a minute. But it's also, you really see the only people who actually do fucking work in this film are the women. And the head, kind of the main female character is named Hallie. And she's played by Vera Miles. She's really good. You will have seen her in a bunch of Hitchcock films, actually, if you check out her IMDb page or her Wikipedia page, you can find other stuff that she's in. She's really, really good. So basically what happens is Stewart, as Rance Stoddard, he wants to bring Liberty Valance to justice. He wants Liberty Valance to pay for his crimes through the legal system. He's a lawyer, and that's what he prioritizes. He is basically laughed at by everyone else in the community, who fear for his life because he refuses to pick up a gun to defend himself. In particular, John Wayne's character, Tom Donovan, is presented as kind of the polar opposite to this. He's presented as this sort of he's the one who's actually going to go out and save the day, and he's constantly kind of belittling Stoddard, saying you're going to need a gun, there's no other way to do that. In fact, this is the film where John Wayne first starts using the word pilgrim in the way that you're kind of used to the John Wayne, pilgrim, and so that's definitely one of those historical artifacts where suddenly he starts saying pilgrim everywhere, and as a kind of a cultural osmosis, we're we just go, what the fuck, that's just something we're just used to him saying, but this is actually the first time he said it, and it's very late in his career. I would have assumed he would have said it at some point in the 30s or 40s, but anyway, so you get this opposition between Donovan and Stoddard in terms of like how to deal with this situation, and this is kind of exemplified not only because there is the marshal, the town marshal, is a complete fucking joke. He's basically a cowardly hick. He's definitely the comic relief of the film, and he basically never shows an ounce of personal integrity or any kind of desire to do his job at any point in the fucking film. So what we have is, the kind of lawful authority is refusing to act and is overtly treated as nonsensical and overtly treated as comical. And yet Stewart's character, Stoddard, still believes in kind of the rule of law. The interesting gender politics here, which I'll bring up just because I think it is, for me, one of the most interesting things about the film, is that he's washing dishes in the back. He's hanging out with the women and this kind of old man who owns the restaurant. He's washing dishes. He's happy to wash dishes. He wants to earn his keep. He's wearing an apron. And the other characters in the film actually reference him. Basically, Liberty Valance, Lee Marvin's character, actually references him as, dishwasher. I mean, he's basically calling him a sissy for the entire length of the film. There's a particular moment where, in the restaurant, Stoddard is serving a steak to John Wayne's character, and essentially gets tripped by Liberty Valance and drops the steak on the floor, and it almost comes to a murderous standoff between John Wayne and Lee Marvin, but Stewart kind of doesn't let that happen. He intervenes, and he says, "You guys are mad if you're going to kill each other over a fucking steak." The film really wants us to side with this sort of middle ground between John Wayne and James Stewart. I understand kind of what it's going for, particularly kind of towards the end. Things do kind of end up being end up in a standoff between James Stewart and Lee Marvin. Apparently, and I'm going to spoil a movie that's 50-something years old, 55 years old, so, spoilers, I guess. But, apparently James Stewart does kill Liberty Valance in this gunfight, despite being, lesser armed and not as capable with a gun. You kind of find out later that, John Wayne actually did it for personal reasons involving his love for Hallie, which is another subplot in the film that's really, really fascinating, but I'm not really going to get into quite for this point. I mean, there is this kind of love triangle between the three characters that I think is really compellingly drawn, and I think that Wayne's best performances in the film revolve around his love for Hallie. So you get this kind of idea that we're supposed to kind of think that, like, yes, the rule of law and the education and the knowledge, the school that James Stewart kind of provides are positive things and good for the town. But you also kind of get the sense that, he's not quite man enough to really do what needs to be done, and that you really needed a John Wayne to kind of be the real authority figure who lets all this happen. And so there is this kind of like might makes right argument here. There's also this kind of paralleled with the fact that like political organization is actually a major theme of the film. In fact, the whole kind of thing at issue that kind of draws to the final events of the film is the fact that this kind of unnamed territory is attempting to become a state. And, so basically you've got the homesteaders who are kind of on one side of this picket line who are trying to organize for statehood and kind of get all the benefits and the roads and the irrigation projects and everything that statehood would offer. And they're paired up against the kind of violent, thuggish ranchers, or, cattlemen, rustlers, not ranchers. But they're kind of paired up against those guys. And this kind of conflict between them really becomes the central kind of ideological conflict in the film. I think it definitely kind of, I'm reminded a little bit of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which does kind of get this kind of very simplistic moral political calculus that it engages in through much of the last third of the film. where the ranchers are kind of unambiguous bad guys, and the homesteaders are kind of unambiguously good. Or at least they're a little more complicated than that, but I mean, we do kind of see statehood isn't necessarily a really good thing, which is kind of a question that I think when we talk about kind of political activity, we definitely think about the way that civilization is kind of treated as an unparalleled good is sometimes questionable in terms of the way that we kind of view these texts. But this film really does kind of present this kind of, I think, fairly naive kind of view that the real belief in American values and the American value system, which is it's understandable, and asking those questions would definitely complicate the film much more than I think anybody was able to do in 1962. I'm not even sure anybody would bother with that in 2016. But it is a little bit simplistic, and I think that the way that the political activity becomes kind of treated as that the point was that James Stewart's character couldn't murder or didn't actually murder Liberty Valance, and that his political career is built on a lie, kind of becomes the central theme of the final third of the film, or the final 30 minutes. And it kind of becomes the meaning of the film is that, we need myths and legends, and we're not interested in facts and that sort of thing, and that it's worthwhile to allow James Stewart's character to go on being the quote-unquote man who killed Liberty Valance. And I definitely don't agree with that. I think that it's a really bad message to have in a film. And I think that it was really disappointing to kind of get there and realize that this, what I thought was a really kind of complicated look at the role of violence in society and the role of, organized political activity kind of gets turned into this simplistic, moralistic thing. And, I just, it was really disquieting to me, and I'm not quite sure, I really haven't worked out all my thoughts on that. And this is kind of where I start to think about in terms of, the events that happened today, the 50 people murdered by some homophobic dickbag, regardless of his ethnic background or religious background. There's a man who walked into a gay club with an assault rifle and some explosives and killed or injured over 100 people. This person, I think we can all agree, is the scum of the fucking earth. And how we deal with that as a society is kind of fundamentally the question that we have to answer in terms of the way that we just politically organize ourselves. The man who shot Liberty Valance would argue, ultimately we have James Stewart's approach to this is, we need laws, and we need to organize, and we need to kind of find ways of dealing with these problems that are not based on the whims of individual people. Now, this guy who killed all those people, at least the suspected shooter, because we haven't gotten confirmation at the time of this recording, was killed in the shootout. So obviously he doesn't have a specific, this isn't really based on him per se, because he's already fucking dead. But, it is a question of, the film would seem to argue that in these situations what we need is this kind of violent response, and what we need is to push back with all our might against this kind of, I'll just call it evil. And I agree with that, but I think that the methods matter, and I think that responding to violence with more violence is not necessarily the message I want to be sending. I think that I think violence should be an absolute last resort, and I think that in the long run we only build societies based on the less hyper-masculinized ideal presented by the James Stewart character, presented by Rance Stoddard. And I think ultimately the perspective of Tom Donovan, that the only way to deal with this is to kill it, essentially, is not is not a healthy one for us. And I think that the Westerns, different Westerns will fall different places on the spectrum. But I think there is this kind of fundamental thing where we go to Westerns and we watch Westerns for the excitement, for the violence, and we love the action scenes and all those sorts of things. But they do not present these, at least the good ones. And both Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and particularly My Darling Clementine do have a really interesting kind of complex look at the way we treat violence. But I think both of these films are asking questions about this and kind of presenting it in this kind of fairly nuanced way. But I also think that the message that we often get from these kinds of films is ultimately a fascistic one. That what we need is a strong, powerful person to stand up and kill the bad guys. I guess what I'm saying is, by my standards, Tom Donovan is essentially a Trump supporter. And fuck that shit. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I have a lot more thoughts about all these films, but it's kind of hard just to talk to myself. And I didn't want to literally write an essay and then just read it, because that would be kind of pointless. Find all our stuff at They Must Be Destroyed on site. That's tmbdos.podbean.com. And I'm sure Lee has his outro he can play for you. And I'm hoping he puts I hope you find some cool version of My Darling Clementine to do as the outro music here. So, thanks for listening. Hopefully next week you're going to get to hear us talk about Predator 2 and RoboCop 2, and I have lots of thoughts about those. That's going to be a fun episode. And I promise not to talk about Donald Trump in the next one. So, thanks for listening, and cheers.
death, I draw the line. should have gone back to the F sharp minor and come back out. One of those times.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For past episodes, links to the host's other stuff, and links to podcasts and websites of similar interest, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can also find links to us at iTunes and YouTube, as well as our Facebook group link, which is the best way to get in touch with us. We welcome all comments, questions, movie review suggestions, and criticisms, and we do our best to respond to everyone. You can also find us at Daniel's recently launched oispaceman.com, where you can find his sci-fi themed podcasts about Doctor Who and Red Dwarf. Thank you. Drive through.